Okay, welcome to my set of recorded videos for Digital Game Design Lecture 7, talking about reward systems this week. And the first thing that I want to talk about is just an overarching look at motivation, rewards, and gameplay. And really, motivation we'll talk about in a second, but first let me motivate this kind of week and why we care about it. Because as game designers, we need to think about what motivates us, what motivates our players. We need to understand the kinds of things that we have access to and that we can do to motivate players to perform certain actions within gameplay or to play the game, as we've designed it. And so one of the ways that we can think about this is thinking about what kinds of reward systems exist in digital games and how we can leverage those techniques again, to set players onto the correct or as designed path. And to start thinking about this, I want to go all the way back to just motivation itself and what different kinds of motivation exist, and thinking about, or I want you to be thinking about how you can kind of hook into these different kinds of motivation. So there are two broad categories: intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And the difference being, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. Okay, there we go. So intrinsic motivation is when a person is motivated to do something because they want to do it. That motivation is very internal. They're not necessarily being rewarded for it, but a person is doing that thing because they find it fun or because they find it personally the slide says rewarding, but let's say personally fulfilling. And games do this a lot, right? Games are inherently fun to play, and so we have that kind of internal pull to engage with them. And so good examples of things that are intrinsically motivated are those kinds of like player set goals, things that we decide to do as players because they're interesting to us. Collecting 100% of items in a game, playing through games as fast as possible, or even playing in specific ways, playing stealth versus aggressive, playing, I guess the example here is Civilization, culture-based victories versus aggressive style victories. Those are all kind of like personal choices that come from us internally as players. So that's intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is when a person is motivated to do something because they get something out of it. They're receiving something external for doing it. You go to work and perform your job so that you earn money. You do your assignments or spend time on schoolwork so that you can earn grades, or reward points or whatever. And this can be, even something as simple as like using credit cards to pay for things because, hey, you're getting scene points, but I guess no one goes to the, or very few people, or comparatively less people are going to the movies now. So, we'll use like a rebate rewards card or something like that. Maybe you choose to fight difficult monsters or engage in difficult game encounters because you get more experience for doing that. Or you can look at like the mobile space and say, okay, well, you log on to Pokemon Go or whatever your kind of like gacha game of choice is because you get like daily bonuses or weekly bonuses or what have you. So these are all like, we do extrinsically motivated actions because we receive something external for doing that. And that's basically the difference, right? Intrinsic is all about internally motivated things. Extrinsic is all about we're doing that thing because we are receiving some kind of reward for doing it. And again, games facilitate both these types of motivation very, very easily. And in a lot of cases, or in some cases at least, you can use reward systems within games to turn extrinsically motivated actions into intrinsically motivated ones and have that like transfer of motivation from, hey, I'm doing this because I'm getting paid or because I'm getting experience or because I'm getting daily bonuses, into something like, hey, I'm doing this. Yeah, sure, I get those other things, but I'm doing this because I want to do it. And we'll kind of touch on this towards the end of the course. And then, maybe much later in your game design career as we delve into things like gamification, gameful design, that kind of stuff. But suffice to say for now, that transfer is all about how players are rewarded for certain actions. It's not something that happens automatically. So the next thing that I want to talk about now that we have motivation kind of squared away is, again, one of those formal and dramatic elements. I want to talk about play a little bit and the different kinds of play. So I think this is something that you should remember from your previous course, but if not, it's something that we can delve into a little bit later. But basically what I want you to remember and be thinking about is that there are essentially like 4 different kinds of play that have been defined, and they're all motivated and rewarded a little bit differently. So again, you have 4 different kinds of play across 2 different dimensions. So you've got your competitive play, your chance-based play, your simulation play, and your vertigo play. And all of these things can either be rooted in a rule-based structure or a more free-form structure. So, rule-based competition and free-form competition, rule-based chance, free-form chance, those kinds of things. Again, we'll dive deeper into that if it's something that you're not familiar with. But for the sake of this recording, I'm going to assume that you're on the level with that, and we'll talk about thinking about what's rewarding and what's interesting about each of these kinds of play. So first, we'll look at competition. Reward systems in competitive games are easily quantifiable. The reward systems in these kinds of games provide things that are easy to compare between players or between players and some kind of standard. So reward systems that are, or kinds of rewards that are relevant in this space are things like points and scores, things like virtual items that carry some kind of value, and then looking on to competing or comparing with other players, specifically thinking about things like leaderboards and achievements, things like that. Those kinds of rewards are relevant in a competitive scenario because they offer that kind of quantifiable data. And I can say, hey, I'm better than you at game X, or you can say you're better than me at game Y. And so those, again, that's kind of why those kinds of rewards are more useful in this kind of context. Stepping forward, chance-based play is interesting, right? Because in competitive play, there's this implication that player skill means something. A player can be better at the game or better at this part of the game than someone else. When you look at purely chance-based play and chance-based play structures, it's rare or rarer that players have any control over the outcome of that kind of play. Excuse me. So when players don't have that kind of control, it really de-emphasizes and in some cases eliminates like the ability to be skilled in these kinds of play scenarios. And so we think about chance-based play very differently than we think about competitive style play. And so the rewards and the kind of rewards that we offer in chance-based structures is thinking about more about the fun of these things is kind of tied into the idea of chance itself, and so that can be important in the reward systems. And interestingly enough, like if I think we kind of touched on this last week, so I won't harp on it a lot. But in chance-based systems, especially when I've got a slot machine here, but especially when a player is like investing something into this chance-based structure, whether it's real money or like game resources, you can actually use your rewards and use the rewards and how you design the rewards to make a player feel accomplished or feel as if they have achieved or won something, even if they've achieved like a net loss. So like maybe they spend, I don't know, like 100 virtual currency and then they win 50 virtual currency. If you structure those rewards and like the kind of like the sounds or the animations that play, even though the players lost those kind of like 50 coins as far as like net value, that can still feel like a win, and that's very interesting. I guess psychologically to think about. Stepping forward, mimicry and vertigo. So mimicry or simulation or make-believe based play, again, is a little bit different in thinking about how you would reward those kinds of play scenarios, because it's all about portraying imaginary characters. And to this point, oftentimes players are intrinsically motivated and in some cases intrinsically rewarded because they're driving their own story and their own goals within that play space. And so when we think about what's rewarding about these kinds of scenarios is really looking at how we can reward the player for acting, reacting, and basically exerting their own autonomy on the space of the game. And so there's a lot of like really interesting ways you can think about doing that as well. And finally, when we think about vertigo, we think like the nature of that style of play is this surrender of stability, whether that's physical stability and we're actually thinking about a sense of motion through play, or mental stability where you were thinking about playing with like fear or other senses, and like things that are rewarding in these kinds of scenarios are again kind of like the slide says adrenaline based. I'm trying to break it down a little bit more interesting than that, but really it is like overcoming that instability, overcoming a sense of danger or threat, or overcoming fear if we're thinking about tense games or horror games or thrillers. Again, just kind of like a primer to think about different kinds of rewards and different kinds of reward systems or structures being relevant in different kinds of scenarios. And so why do we care about all of this? And really what I hope to impress upon you in thinking about, the intro psych stuff that you've kind of already maybe watched, and the rest of this lecture going forward, is thinking about here's why reward systems and reward structures are so important. So some authors, Sale and Zimmerman, have kind of broken down aspects of play itself into three categories. Gameplay, which we're familiar with, ludic activities, which is kind of like your game science word for, basically the term just means playful activities, and then the act of being playful itself. So from there, we can say, okay, our goal as game designers, the goal of successful game design is to create play that is meaningful. And a big part of meaningful play is that the relationships between the actions that the player is doing and the outcomes of those actions are discernible and integrated, meaning that the player understands that their actions have had some kind of effect on the game, and that they are in control of their outcomes. And that process should be integrated within the game system. And really, that's why we care. We want our players to feel like they are having an impact, and reward systems are a piece of that puzzle. They help build that relationship for the players over time. So that is the intro to this week. I'll do a couple more videos, and I will see you in the next one and see you in class.